Hello and welcome back to my channel, Young Black Social Worker, the place where I talk about all things related to social work, and to my series Daily Dilemmas for Social Workers, where I unpick your dilemmas. If you haven't already, please do make sure that you have liked, that you have commented, that you have subscribed, and let me know if there are any dilemmas that you want me to cover. The dilemma says, "Dear Yewande, I had a case go wrong, and even though I followed every procedure, I still feel like I failed the family. How do I let go of the guilt?" This is a really good dilemma, and one that I was actually quite looking forward to answering, because I know all too well about that guilt and what that can mean for us as social workers. The thing is that feeling can be very heavy, and it can stick with us for a long time. It can affect our confidence, it can affect our capacity, it can affect just how we see ourselves and how others, importantly, see us also. It can also affect our relationships that we have with those that we're there to support, with our colleagues and other important agencies or professionals or individuals in society. Because of the already bad press that we can get as social workers, the moment that we make a mistake, it can be amplified times 10. And even just being within the profession, we can struggle with the thought of making mistakes. We're already carrying that fear of making a mistake because of what public opinion may be, or because of what others may think about us. As social workers, we are often seen as the only professional who is able to make so much of an important decision, or we are seen as the only professional, the only service that has the authority or the power to go in and do something substantial for a child, for a family, or other vulnerable people in society. What I will say to that is that I need to emphasize the fact that as social workers, we do not operate in a vacuum. We operate on a wider scale. There are other professionals, agencies, family members, individuals that are involved in safeguarding. In working together, it talks about safeguarding being everybody's business and not just social workers. So there should be a shared responsibility and a shared understanding of the fact that we are all there to keep children or whoever, vulnerable adults, safe. So I needed to add that disclaimer. More than half the time, we are holding the emotions, or we are holding the weight of the responsibility and the outcomes for things that we can't necessarily entirely control. There are things that happen that are just out of our remit or out of our control. And if we spend too much time trying to change public opinion, we wouldn't have any real time to actually sit there and do our day-to-day work. But sometimes, even with our best intentions or with all the hopes and desires of the world, things don't always go according to how we would want it to. Now, I would assume, I would hope, I would believe that every single social worker that comes into social work comes in for the right intentions. They come in to make a difference. They come in to make real, lasting, impactful change for people. There are many other professions that we could go into that is not as taxing as what we do at the moment. That much I know. So if you're making the conscious decision to become a social worker, I would assume that your heart is there. What I won't do is detract from the fact that there are professionals out there, there are social workers out there who, through one reason or another, that hope, that joy or that passion or that motivation for going into the profession may have been lost or may be a bit warped. I'm not naive to that, but what I can say is that for the majority of social workers who do come into the profession, they come in wanting to make the right decisions and achieve the best outcomes. So you are now in a situation whereby you have made a mistake. What's next? First thing that you need to do is to tell someone. So acknowledge the fact that mistake has been made. Reflect on that mistake that you've made, learn from it, and then move on. What happens, or what tends to happen, is that social workers struggle with the ability to move on from that particular situation. Whether that's because of a situation that has been enforced on them, whether it is because of things being published by the media, or whether it is just internally you are unable or you are struggling to be able to move on from that particular mistake that you have made. Now, I want to add a disclaimer that I'm not talking about very, very severe situations whereby, there might have been something very unfortunate that's happened, or something tragic that has happened. And even then, we need to think about where the service fits in that system of what had led to that particular situation going wrong. So once you've made that mistake, it could be something such as, you have mistakenly breached confidentiality, or you have mistakenly said something in a meeting that you had to go back and try and rectify, or you've written something in your assessment that you now have to go back and rectify. I'm not saying that these are trivial things. I'm not saying that they are not that they are so insignificant to you or to others, because at the end of the day, we work with human beings. We work with very sensitive information. So I don't want to trivialize any mistake that is made, or say that it is something that is so minor that's like, oh, just get on with it, or for the person on the receiving end to just get on with it and to move on. But what you can do is you can control how you feel about the situation and what you do next about that situation within the system that you are in, but also personally for yourself as well. So one of the things that you need to do is to reflect on that particular situation, and reflect in a safe space. Reflect with your manager, with your colleagues, someone that you can trust, and really dissect what happened along that process, along that journey that resulted in that mistake being made. And then figure out what is it that you need to do differently for next time. So what can you actually learn from that particular situation? Because it's all well and good knowing that you've made a mistake, but if you're going to repeatedly make that mistake, that's when it becomes an issue. That's when it could become a practice issue, or it could become, something that develops into something quite significant. So if you are able to acknowledge that you've made a mistake, you're not too prideful, or you're not too stubborn to recognize that, then that's a positive. Something else that you need to do is separate your professional responsibility from your personal worth. So just because you made that mistake doesn't mean that you are less than as an individual. Doesn't mean that you are stupid. Doesn't mean that you are unqualified. Doesn't mean that you aren't educated, because sometimes when we make mistakes, that can be the narrative, or that can be the belief of people, especially if it's that you're dealing with people and they might be challenging you on a mistake that you've made. Don't let it become so much that it impacts on how you now view yourself professionally, or how you see yourself personally as well. And that's why I say you should use the experience to inform your future practice, but don't let it define you. So just because you made a mistake at this stage doesn't mean that you are going to continue making those mistakes, because you've learned from it and you know what to do differently for next time. Don't be so hard on yourself, and recognize the fact that learning is part of your development. So, I've been in that situation where I've made mistakes, and during that moment, it felt like everything was crashing down. Like the whole world was completely crashing down on me. Like I couldn't see myself getting out of the situation. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a bad social worker, I'm a bad person. Like I just internalized everything. And like I said earlier, it's not to trivialize the impact of that mistake, but I had to get to a point where I had to start beating myself up about it and saying, okay, this is what I did, but this is what I'm going to learn from it so that it doesn't happen again, and this is how I'm going to make amends for the situation also. So, making sure that you're part of, if a complaint arises from it, making sure that you're part of that complaint process, that you are engaging with the complaint process, not hiding away from it, that you are making amends with the person that has been impacted by the mistake, whether it is, a service user, whether it is your colleague, whether it is your manager, whoever it is, making sure that you are making amends also. Don't be part of the percentage of people that they say can never apologize for their mistakes, or that can never say sorry. And lastly, what I want you to do is to remember the fact that you did not come into social work to do a bad job. You did not come into social work to ruin people's lives. You did not come into social work to, literally be a tornado and go. You came in to make real and significant change, and don't let anybody make you think of otherwise because of one minor mistake you had made. And so going back to the dilemma, this person said, how do I let go of the guilt? All the things that I mentioned are the ways in which you can let go of the guilt. And something else that I think we should think about is, how do you define what has gone wrong and what has gone right. What was the outcome that you wanted to happen? Sometimes we have the best intentions for our families or for the people that we're there to support, but sometimes with all the best intentions in the world, it might not go according to plan. Now, by whose standard is that? Is it by your standard? Is it by the standard of the agencies involved? Is it by the standard of the person who you're there supporting? Everybody is at different journeys of accepting help. So you might do, I've had situations whereby I've worked with families, I've worked with parents, and I was really, really rooting for them. I did everything above and beyond to make sure that the right outcomes happened, because I cared, I'm passionate, I wanted to make sure that, the right thing happened. And when it did happen, because let's say, the parents didn't follow the plan, or they just struggled to engage, or even in unfortunate circumstances, they just weren't at a place where they were able to accept their help, it can make you feel very, very guilty. But if you know that you've done everything, you can say with confidence that you've done everything that you can do to support those people. You've done everything that you can do to support that child, support that family. And unfortunately, the outcome that happened wasn't necessarily to, what they would have wanted. It gets to a point where you have to recognize that doesn't make you less than, it doesn't make you a crappy social worker, that doesn't mean that you're not able to do your job. It's the fact that we are working with people, and we are working with people who have free will, we are working with people who have experienced trauma, we are working with people who may not always have the perfect role model or the perfect experience, or who may not have the skills to be able to put in place what you're trying to support them with. That doesn't make you any less than, that doesn't make them any less than. It's just unfortunate that is a situation that they are in. And you will often see that in social work. I don't think that's spoken about enough. You will often see that in social work where a lot is done to support people, but they just, if they're not accepting, if they're not willing, if they just don't have capacity to recognize the fact that they need to change, then it just won't happen. And so I hope that what I've shared within this dilemma has been helpful to the person who sent it in. It is definitely something that as social workers we will encounter across our social work career. It is something that we might wrestle with in our social work career. It will be something that we will replay in our minds over and over again. But how we deal with those particular situations is carrying ourselves with grace, carrying ourselves with professionalism, and making sure that we are always doing what we can do to make amends where needed, recognizing any flaws that are in our own practice, and being open to develop and learn from them. As always, if you have any dilemmas that you want me to answer, then please do send them to the information that is in the description box below, and I'll catch you in my next one. Bye.